It was a good weekend of action. Let's get started with our number one team. And it's the same team we're going to say number one. It feels like for a really long time. Mickey Turner, who you've seen his work on The Athletic as well as on Sounder at Heart out there in Seattle, who covers this team head to toe, as well as I think running super marathons and playing soccer and everything else. His Twitter handle is way more impressive than mine, who's just retweeting other reporters saying cool things. To talk about Seattle, Mickey, how's it going?
Good early morning here from the West Coast. Yeah, it's been a pretty entertaining start to the season out here for us, for sure.
So, Doyle, I
Mickey,
challenged Mickey. I was
every
like, is
person
this too
that
early for you? And he was like, no, I'm an early bird. I got this. So, it's
Mickey,
impressive.
every
Believe me, I
person that
prefer
we've
not to be an
had,
early bird.
every person that we've had on this show to talk about the Sounders this year, including us, has said that they are kind of surprised at how, at least like more than kind of surprised, like very surprised at how good this team has been out of the gates. New formation, coping with some significant absences and just losses over the off season. Are you going to throw your hat in with that group as well, or did you expect this?
I'm going to have to be honest and say that I am surprised at the start to the season. They, they were coming back with the same spine, which I think was always going to at least give them make them competitive to start. I mean, you come in with Nico Ladera, Rui Diaz, the center back pairing, and then you had Joao Paulo and Christian Roldan. So, I mean, it's not like we thought, or at least I thought that they were going to be terrible, but they lost a lot of key pieces. Leardom and Jovan Jones, even though you can debate whether Jovan Jones is past it at this point. But aside from that, and then George Morris is going to be gone for half the season, and then goes down with the ACL injury, so he's going to be gone for the year. And their salary cap situation made it such that they were not going to really be able to add anything at least until the summer. And so they were going to rely on a bunch of kids. And Garth Largaway, the GM, I think prepared fans for the fact that it was going to be, kind of a skeleton crew, at least as far as depth was concerned. So coming in, and then you have Joss Atencio come out, gangbusters. You've had Danny Leva start to make at least, some inroads. And then you had, I think what has been the real key here is the formation change and how they've taken to it. And that has been the effectiveness of that, is especially on defense, I think would surprise just about anybody.
So, we're going to talk Roldans, but now we get to talk too. Alex Roldan was awesome this weekend. He's been great at right wing back. Did you or the people around see this coming? And what have you made of his start to the season so far?
Yeah, I mean, last year he made the team out of training as a trialist, coming in as a trialist because he was cut coming into last year, and so he comes in and plays a fairly solid right back, just a pure right back, getting starts here and there, and then improves kind of over the course of the season to the point where he comes in and starts MLS Cup. Didn't have the greatest game in that, but again, that was probably more due to deficiencies elsewhere in that game than him necessarily. So he comes in off the start of what was a pretty good transition to right back from his position in the midfield coming into the season, and then this year has just been incredible, and his trajectory has been just off the charts. I will say that I was a big fan of his last year, so I was hoping or expecting for a progression there. So I won't claim to be totally surprised with him coming in and playing well. But again, I think you have to say that at this point he's knocking on the door of potential All-Star appearance based on his play this year. And he's just the wing back position just really suits him well. He's not a lockdown defender. And he doesn't necessarily have the skills to be an out-and-out midfielder. So you've got this kind of hybrid situation. And, we can probably talk about Nuhu, who doesn't allow to talk about Nuhu, kind of a similar situation on the other side. But at least as far as what Roldan has done, he's just, the formation just suits him to a T and really accentuates all of his skills. So it's been really impressive to watch. And it's been great to see that he's kind of progressed from being a trialist to being a locked in starter at this point.
Mickey, one of the things that's really shocked me about the first month of this season is given how well Seattle are playing. I feel like Sounders fans haven't been all that obnoxious on Twitter. Like, have you guys gone soft? Is it like, have you guys really been passed by Atlanta and Orlando and Cincinnati in that department? Is this just a newer, like, kinder, gentler Sounders fan base that we're seeing?
Well, with age comes maturity, so I think there's certainly some of that. And yeah, it's been I can't claim to know the specific algorithms which are following to measure obnoxiousness of Sounders fans on Twitter, but I think it's just been one of those things. I think again, fans are probably a little bit surprised at the level that the Sounders have performed at, and it's been for the last 5 years or so. They've had slow starts most of that time. They started out pretty well last year or the year before they kind of fell off for a little bit. But I think again, fans have always prepared themselves for slow starts and then ramping it up through the course of the year. This has been a pleasant change of pace, and so I think fans are kind of enjoying the ride. So half maturity, half smelling the roses.
So I'm not going to say obnoxious here, but for Brian Schmetzer versus Bob Bradley, it never ends. It feels like it's the rivalry bigger than the game and bigger than the teams. Obviously, feeling better than Bob, the playoffs over the last 2 years. What do we think was said at the end of this game between the two, and how's Brian Schmetzer feeling right now?
Okay. So here's two part of the Sounders fans not being necessarily too mature because they do enjoy sticking it to Bob Bradley on Twitter. The only thing that I can think of, because Schmetzer's never going to share that with us, is that during the game, when the scoreboard was, showing the summary of, goals scored and substitutions, they listed the LA Galaxy as the as the chyron or the description. So our speculation is that Bradley saw that and got rather peeved. And again, aside from that, it's just one of those things again that Sounders fans just in some ways it's a different kind of thing than the Portland rivalry. Which is obviously born out of proximity and dislike. The LAFC is born out of probably a little bit of the new kids on the block loving to take them down a peg. And the Sounders have been able to do that, in the 2019 playoffs and then last year in the playoffs. And obviously they've had a good start to the games this year. So I think it's just a little bit of, taking the new kids down a peg.
All right, Mickey, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. You can probably pencil in the exact start time at number one for the Power Rankings show for the next 6 weeks, since it looks like Seattle's just going to be living at the top. They've got some breathing space right now as well. You can catch his work, as I said, Sounder at Heart, The Athletic, wherever else he's writing. Turner ESQ on Twitter because he's a lawyer. He's for real. Me and Doyle are just talking heads on the internet. Mickey, thanks for waking up and joining us.
Hey, have a good day, guys.
All right, Doyle, so that gets us through number one, and not much of a surprise, right? Seattle, they've been the class of the league. I'm going to plug myself real quick here and say number two on this list is the New England Revolution, which one of the two of us picked preseason as their MLS Cup winners. Was it you?
It was not me.
So it was me. I did it. It was me.
Did they win MLS Cup this weekend? Did I miss that?
Number two in the power rankings, week 5? That is equivalent to winning MLS Cup.
They've scored 7 goals, and this is a really good team. Their defense is good and deeper than last year. Matt Turner is still the best keeper in the league. Their central midfield has gotten better. I think Matt Polster's play in central midfield has been one of the sort of unsung, underrated aspects of this team, and he's one of the unsung and underrated players in this league right now. Carlos Heel is awesome. They've scored 7 goals in 6 games. They scored 7 goals in 6 games, man. They play that 4-2-3-1, and they're going to have a lot of the ball, and they're going to create a lot of chances, and they're not going to finish many of them. They play that 4-4-2, they're going to have less of the ball. They're going to create fewer chances. They might finish a higher percentage, but it makes them more vulnerable. They still, like, Bruce Arena still hasn't figured that out. Like, the big hope for this team is that Adam Buksa can do on some semi-regular basis run a goal what he did in this game. But he's got to do it from the start because Gustavo Bo can't play as a lone forward in a 4-2-3-1. And I don't think that their ceiling is high enough in a 4-4-2.
Yeah, and you saw that, I think, over the first, 70 minutes of this game against Columbus, a 1-0 win for them. Of Bo was pretty invisible, but was kind of at the point of everything. And then you see Heel just trying to pull stuff out of thin air. But you mentioned Polster is underrated. Maciel has been phenomenal this year, and I think that's allowed Polster to play the way he did. And then John Bell getting to start his first start in his MLS career last week against Philly in a 1-1 tie on the road midweek. And then the start here where Henry Kessler, once he got into the starting lineup last year, him and Farrell were locked in. It was one of the reasons they were successful in the playoffs because they had stability at center back, but they had zero depth. So I think in terms of being able to cover over the course of this season, to show now that they have 3 starting center backs was pretty huge coming out of this week where, okay, defensively they're going to be in all these games. You don't have to stress as much offensively that you need to score 3 or 4 to get wins.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that having that kind of depth all along the back line, having added depth in central midfield and even on the wings, it puts them in position to grind out a lot of wins like this over the course of the season, where they can just wear teams down and create the better chances and control the game and eventually hopefully find one. And that's a great way to go into the playoffs with home field advantage. I still question whether or not they have the ceiling they need to get through the playoffs and get into MLS Cup, let alone win it, which you're trying to give them a trophy after a month of soccer. So, like, that's just where I am on the Revs right now.
Campeones. Yeah, it hasn't been fun, let's just say, at all times for the Revs, but they've been getting results. 11 points. They're on top of the Eastern Conference. I think we're about to talk about 15 teams where we're going to say, well, they haven't hit their form yet. We don't know who they are yet.
Right.
So if you're in first when that's the case, or you're higher up the standings, that's not a negative for any of these sides. So it's going to be an interesting run for a lot of these teams going forward. Let's take a step forward to Philadelphia, who played New England midweek, got the 1-1 tie. Going into this game against the Red Bulls, it would have been 4 home games with no wins to start the year if they didn't get a victory. Curtin goes with Corey Burke, as well as Anthony Fontana from the kick in place of Shibilko, slides Montero a little bit deeper into the diamond. Corey Burke gets the goal. 9 minutes in, Fontana helps set up that goal. And then the Red Bulls, right now, they don't create enough chances, so Philly looked fairly comfortable, it felt, seeing this out over the course of the game.
Yeah, and I think that's a credit to Philadelphia because they had basically the same lift that I was talking about Columbus having, right?
Yeah.
Like 9 games, and I think it's 9 games in about 40 days for Philadelphia, which is, like, even in the middle of the year when you have your legs under you, that's a lot. Philly did that while juggling a couple of injuries and, of course, a long suspension for Jose Martinez, in which Leon Flock filled in admirably, including in this game. You're right, they're not clicking yet, but at the same time, they're getting results. And a lot of that comes from understanding exactly who they are and where their strength is. And you saw it on the play that led to that goal against the Red Bulls, which is you win the 50-50 and you instantly pour into the box and you get multiple runners and you just keep the defense scrambled. You never allow the defense to get set. That's what Philadelphia does under Jim Curtin. That's how they won the Shield last year, and that's how they've come into this season, gotten into the CCL semifinals, and had a pretty good first month in the regular season, and don't look like they've really skipped a beat. I do think it's almost the same with the Revs, though. It's like, can they get enough firepower on the field to be that really top end team without sacrificing too much control of the game? And I think that's something that Jim Curtin's going to have to figure out over the course of the season. But, like, it's a good problem to solve when you're picking up points and wins anyway.
And they have something different than the Revs, which is they've made a big signing right now. They brought in a full Hungarian international who's going to Euros to play as a 10, as a winger, whatever it is. So, Doyle, they've kind of stepped outside to fix that problem, which I was a little surprised by because I thought everything was going to be just internal promotion for young guys.
Yeah, I thought so too. But I'm not mad at this, right?
No.
Like you want teams to be aggressive, especially a team like Philadelphia that just they sold $15 million worth of homegrowns this past winter. They're not going to go away from that, from that approach to youth development. But at the same time, iron forges iron. If Philadelphia wants their homegrowns to be the best possible players they can be, they're going to have to beat out other good players to earn playing time. Like, this isn't about getting 40 points and being a decent up and coming team that's 2 years away from being 2 years away. This is about putting this talent pipeline in a situation where these kids are competing for trophies and maybe on the Brendan Anderson path to the Champions League in Europe, while at the same time putting the team in the Champions League here in CONCACAF. Like, this is what you want to see. So I like the fact that Philly were aggressive here. I am curious to know what it means at the end of the season.
Right.
But for now, it's like it's weird. They're still like an undervalued stock, even though they're the reigning Supporter Shield champions.
Daniel Gadzig is the player we're talking about. He just got named to Hungary's Euros roster. So we don't know when he'll join. I have been out there saying now that we know Philly's in a CCL semifinal, like way later, MLS should just give them all the Garber bucks and have them go out and sign everyone in the world to just win that thing finally, or take MLS players on loan. I'll do anything for them. I want to say Leon Flock's been very good at defensive midfield, filling in for Jose Martinez. We are talking about what is the USMNT depth chart at that position. It's a question mark. You got a guy now who's shown flexibility. He's played at a high level. He's played in CCL. I know it's only like 8 games, but he has to be in a conversation for a Gold Cup roster spot right now.
I disagree.
Really?
Let's see more than 8 games. He's played 3 of them at D-Mid. Like, come on, he's 20 years old. This is the first time he's played at the top flight. I'm excited about him. Like, I wish that the U20 World Cup was happening. Yeah, I wish the U20 World Cup was happening this summer because he'd be a lock for that.
Yeah.
And he's young for the next Olympic cycle. So, like, there's a lot ahead of him, but I'm not penciling him into any full U.S. national team rosters just yet. But he has been very good. He has been very good.
Doyle trying to roll Rico Clark back out there rather than give my boy Leon Flock an opportunity. Big game for him, obviously. Good week for the Philadelphia Union. Morgan Tenza, 1, congratulations on graduating. I think she graduated from college last week. And 2, she wants us to mention the Jim Curtin fits. It's been smooth. If you can go casual and dress up and just look like comfortable in both, that means you've got swagger because the clothes aren't making it. It's Jim Curtin who's making it, you know?
Yeah,
for sure. Dole's like, I want none of this.
I want none of this. Are you kidding me?
All right, well then, you're welcome. Then we'll move on. So let's move to number 4, and who else but the Chicharito Show and the LA Galaxy. Andy Deosa, who is in the chat and going to come join us right now. He covers both LA teams for Yahoo Sports. So we're going to ask him about LA Galaxy as well as LAFC when he gets in here, which I'm very excited about. I've never done this before, so it's all happening for me. So whenever you get a chance, Andy, jump in. Oh, there you are. Andy, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. How's it going, fellas?
Pretty good so far. Doyle's killing my buzz, but besides that, I think we're having a good time. Speaking of buzz, Chicharito's a light. The Galaxy are a light. What's the vibe? What's the feeling among this fan base in the city for a Galaxy team that's maybe been surprisingly good to start the year?
Man, I'll tell you what, it does feel kind of like the old days already. I mean, it's just the start to the season, right? But I think with all the things that happened in the past few years, having Zlatan here, and the buzz is always high around this team to begin with. But I think last year you saw the fan base really, go after the front office and really exceed results and stuff like that. So now that Vanney's here, the team has turned around, has done a complete 360, and Chicharito's obviously doing what he's doing. The fans are confident. The team is confident. I've talked to a lot of the players around the club, and the mentality and the bottom line from all these players is that this just feels like a family. And it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to actually see it on the pitch. And players from Sebastian Lletget to Jonathan Dos Santos to even the youngest guys, they all have really bought into what Vinny's trying to do here. And I think the most surprising part out of everything is that this is just still the beginning of the process. And they still make sure to let us know that this is going to be a learning curve for them. And they're only in the beginning. So that's kind of scary when you think about how they've started and how they're rolling through.
Andy, you mentioned the young guys, and it's one of the things that LA have, even though they're in the most talent-rich spot, arguably in North America, they've never really been able to leverage that academy. And what we've seen over the past couple of weeks, especially between Cameron Dunbar making a huge defensive play against LAFC, and then Efra Alvarez was just dealing against Austin. Julian Araujo with a nice assist on Chicharito's goal. Like it feels like the corner's been turned with that. It feels like Greg Vanney has made it a point to get these guys on the field in high leverage situations, and they are delivering.
Most definitely. And I also, when you think about these young players, it's a little harder for them to get playing time. And you talk about games like against LAFC and tough rivals like Seattle, and even the opening game in Fort Lauderdale, which I was at for the Miami game. Like those are high pressure situations. So the fact that we were able to see Cameron Dunbar and Efrain get in the game, and then I believe the last two games, Julian has been one of the best players on the team. Honestly, his confidence is growing, his quality is growing. So it definitely does seem like that corner's turned. And I was saying yesterday to somebody, once these Wednesday games really start rolling around, I feel like we'll be able to see some more of the Cameron Dunbars. But like you said, they've all been contributing, and that is, I think, a very key part of this success. I mean, you have young stars like you've mentioned, you have solidified stars that have played around the world. Put this together so quickly is you can't overstate and give the guy all the credit that he deserves.
So you mentioned a lot of the young players, a lot of the stars. Kevin Cabral hasn't been talked about because the Galaxy have been good, even though he hasn't been in the door. Finally makes his debut off the bench. He's only 21. What's the expectations early on here? What's the thought process behind this signing for the club, and what maybe they're looking for him to bring to the team this year and in the future?
Yeah, I think the biggest expectation for Kevin Cabral is somebody else to score goals. I mean, I think the Galaxy will be happy with Chicharito scoring all that he can, but they do need that next person that's going to also help him. And I think we saw a little bit of those glimpses in the Austin game where he came in and he was really quick on the ball. It wasn't much of a sample size, but he did score. I mean, the pass from Chicharito was amazing. He was just offside, but that right there is going to have them excited for what they want to see. And that's really what it is, a player that could help stretch that field. And Vanney has talked about it. He could use him as a winger. He could use him as a striker. I think what they're looking for mostly is just to change the dynamic of that attack where it's not so reliant on just Chicharito making those runs in the area and somebody trying to pick him out. And all the props as well to Ethan Zubak, who has played well in these first few games. But Cabral is just going to be another piece in that attack. And I think that fans will quickly, like this player. He's fast on the ball, and I think he's gonna do great things for them. And once again, like if they're in this position that they're in right now, after these first few games, just adding another piece is pretty impressive. And that's what they want. They want to be a team that has these different options and these dynamics. So it'll be interesting to see how he fits in. But Vanney said he's not going to rush him. Vanney said he's going to make sure that this is a process and he gets acclimated to the team as he should. And I think once that does happen, I mean, you're kind of forgetting that this team goes from having a stud like Christian Pavon on the wing to kind of having to replace that really out of nowhere. So I think that Kevin Cabral is going to be a good look for them.
We talked a lot about Chicharito having a tough year and what it was last year. We haven't really talked about Jonah Dos Santos, who also had a disappointing season. He's had up and down years throughout his career. He's had a resurgence as well to start this season. It's been a big part of them being good. What have you heard from him? What have you seen from him? And how he came into 2021 and what he's done for the club?
Jonathan Dos Santos is a very interesting case because I feel like last year he didn't really say much. Obviously, with the injuries, it was kind of easier for him to kind of just go under the radar. And the way the team was going, I don't expect him to be out there speaking to the media every chance he gets. But this season, he's been speaking to us really on every week. He's happy, he's smiling. I think he's actually been one of the more vocal players to kind of talk about how much the change has really happened. And he's the one that he came out and said a few weeks ago, like, I've never felt these vibes in this locker room from the time that I've been here. And you know the type of person he is, personality. He really is going to strive for that. So I think that he's probably, I would say, on the top of the list benefiting from this change just because, like, if you're playing alongside a player like Zlatan, like Jonah is a veteran in this league and a veteran established player. So it's a little bit of a different dynamic, him trying to deal with something like that, and then coming to deal with Chicharito. He's been outspoken, like I mentioned. Like people ask him all types of questions and he answers them. He's just having a good time. And I think once again, like you said, when the team is rolling and Chicharito scoring goals, it's a lot easier for him. So I think he put in a great shift against LAFC. People in LA seem to think that he's been kind of quiet, which I tell them it's not necessarily a bad thing when he's not the person that's getting mentioned every 20 seconds in the game, because that's not, you really don't need that. But I mean, that goal he scores to win the game against LAFC is going to go a long way. I don't know if he's fully fit yet, and he has mentioned about trying to get back to the player that everybody knows he could be. But I think he's working hard at it. He's working with the trainers, and he's putting in these shifts. And I think that it's definitely trending in the right direction, coming off of the disappointment from last year.
So one more question then about the Galaxy. Greg Vanney with Toronto was sort of known for a team that would be patient in possession and establish control over the game by using the ball and pulling teams apart. Obviously, it's very early in the process here in LA, and we haven't seen much of that yet. Do you think, though, that is what Vanney wants to create for this team, or do you think it's going to be more of a kind of a transition team that uses their speed on the flanks? Or like, do you have an idea of what this team's identity is going to be by the end of the season?
Yeah, I feel like that's the golden question that not many people are talking about, because, like you said, Vanney has this established style that he played that he was very successful with, and he has players in line that can help him get to that. But at the same time, I also think that Vanney is kind of just trying to take this as it comes and see what works best. I mean, we get so caught up in them playing so well and Chicharito being in the lead for the Golden Boot, forgetting that, this team is not even fully put together yet. They still have players that are not even in LA that have already been signed. So they're still transitioning. I think that they benefited a lot from playing so many preseason games, and that's what's gotten them to this point now. But to your question, I don't think that he's going to try to recreate what he did in Toronto. I think that he's really going to try to formulate this team on its own way, because once again, from Vanney's standpoint, he's also feeling that pressure of him having to be super successful with the Galaxy, having been a player, having the Galaxy's past few years, and trying to get them back to that stature of greatness that they have in this league. So I think that he's going to see what works, and he's also going to try to not make it be one thing. He's going to try to make it be an array of things, which is why you see him get players like Kevin Cabral, and why you'll see him play Zubac to start next to Chicharito one game and then maybe not see him at all. You have players like Sasha, who are MLS vets that could give you a lot. And then, like we mentioned, the young players, Cameron Dunbar and Efrain Alvarez, could give this attack a whole different dynamic. So I think Vanney, for one, the thing that I think he should get the most praise for so far is the way that he's adjusted his tactics throughout the games and coming into these different situations. When they played against the Red Bulls, he kind of knew what game they were going to present, so he went about it one way. The LAFC game is a masterclass when you think about two coaches going at each other and trying to adjust those tactics, which he obviously ends up getting the best of at the end. But if you're the downfall for the Galaxy these past few seasons have been the defense, and they got off to that terrible start where they allowed all those goals. And in these past two games, they've only allowed one, and they've taken a decent amount of pressure still. But if you're able to stay composed and still get these wins, I think Vanney's going to go about it whatever way is going to keep making those results come in.
Yeah, so we're talking Barnsley versus Swansea now. We're talking Orlando City at number 5 in the power rankings for them. A 1-0 win over DC United this weekend. Doyle, this is one of those teams that, to me, fits into what I said around the Revs at 2, which is haven't hit their form yet, but they're getting results, and all of that is positive.
Yeah, and they have one of the great coaches in the league in Oscar Pareja. And we've seen Oscar Pareja teams do this before, where they do not have it in the final third yet, but they are just miserable to play against. They're difficult to break down. They will waste a little bit of time if they need to. Oscar Pareja teams have pretty consistently done that over the years, and we saw all of it on display. And oh, by the way, they are unbeaten so far this year.
Yeah.
Now they don't look anywhere near as good as they looked last summer, especially in Orlando for the bubble. And they don't have the unique sort of counterattacking fulcrum that Daryl Dike was last year, but it's fine. It's just fine. Like, this team is figuring out a way to get points and the occasional win. And if you do that while you're kind of sharpening what you do in the final third, you're going to be around the entire year. And that's where Orlando is right now.
And for them, it hasn't been the hardest strength of schedule. They started with Atlanta off CCL. They went to KC, which was, I think, their biggest result, the 1-1 on the road. And then Cincinnati, NYCFC as well at home. And now DC. So I think we're going to learn a bit more about them as we go along this season. Obviously, Pato out for a little bit longer as well. We got a question on ETR this week, which we haven't talked about, which is Kyle Smith has been one of the best backups, both at left back and right back when he's had to. This week it was right back. And he did this for Louisville, but you don't know how it's going to, push up. He is a very good attacking option at those fullback positions.
He is, and he does it in a different way than like Juan is the usual. Obviously, he's going to overlap, and he's going to, ideally hit 1 million crosses. And if Juan hits 1 million crosses, then 6 or 7 of them will be really good, and that's some goals. Kyle Smith isn't that type of guy, but what he showed in this win over DC United was his range of passing, like that ball over the top that unlocked the entire DC defense and set up the goal. Like, there aren't a ton of fullbacks in this league who can do that, and he's done it consistently, whether it's been right back or left back. So they have depth there. They also have depth in center back because Janssen hasn't been starting every game. They have depth in central midfield where Oriol Roussel was crucial for them last year. He hasn't played yet this year. And your guy, Jackson Mendez, is, in my opinion, he's leveled up. So there are a lot of answers. There's still a big question mark at the number 9. I understand there's got to be a lot of energy put towards wanting to keep Daryl Dike. But given what Daryl Dike has been in England over the past 4 months, I can't imagine he stays. And then they'll just end up having to figure out how to replace him. And this is all happening in the midst of what, the team is being sold. It just was not just reported, it was announced by the current owner that they're in the process of selling to the Wilf family, who own a part of Nashville SC and are owners of the Minnesota Vikings. So there's a lot. Yes, they love purple. There's a lot going on with Orlando City, but it's Oscar Pereja, and it's a team with a lot of depth. So I'm like 0% worried about what this means long term for this team's success in 2021.
And we have to start to conceptualize with Philly. I think Dallas, we've seen it as well. Homegrown or young player turns into sale, which then can be flipped back into signings. That's all the way a club should operate. It shouldn't always be, oh, well, Philly sold this player, Orlando sells DK, who's the next young guy up? Like, at some point you fill in with veterans and then you push back with more young players as they come through. It's not about always having the next player ready, and it feels like DK is. And this Orlando team's good enough to contend for MLS Cup. So they do have to, if they do sell him, figure something out at the center forward position. It's been an awesome season already for them. I think it will continue. I had them higher on my entertainment rankings coming into this year, and I think I've been a little disappointed on those power rankings. So I'm waiting for that to come back. I need a little bit more Cash Mueller to sort of hit and to get the full Nani theatrics. The KC game was up there. The KC game was off the rails, and that's when Orlando's at their best, and love watching them do their thing. So they are 5th in the power rankings, pretty Eastern Conference heavy, below the Seattle Sounders, which I think sort of makes sense. It feels like the top 4 or 5 in the East maybe is stronger than that in the West, but the top 1 or 2 maybe now in the West is the elite in the league. Let's keep going with the Eastern Conference. We're going to bring in another guest here. I think we're going to bring, just making sure he's in here. Yeah, Roberto Abramowitz, who is the Spanish voice of NYCFC. So you can hear him all over the radio. Of course, he covers the team and everything else. So Roberto, come on in when you get the opportunity. And we're going to talk about NYCFC and what they've done so far this year, coming off, I think, a frustrating 1-1 tie against Toronto. Roberto, can you hear us? You just got to unmute yourself when you get the chance.
There we go. How's that?
Awesome. Yes, perfect. So, Roberto, I want to start you off with this. You've been around this team since the start. This has been one of the best franchises year after year in MLS. Where it sits right now, how do you feel the current group compares to the last few years we've seen at NYCFC?
I think it's a solid group. I think it compares favorably as the team, tries to do what they brought here to do, which is try to win a cup. And they've made the playoffs every single year since year 2, which is 2016. And I think that every year this team basically gets better. They've had great opportunities to advance into playoffs, and either luck or mistakes have turned out to cost the team. So, but as far as the roster is concerned, and by the time new signings come in, because I know the team is still looking to improve the team, but everybody else who they brought in, if they can stay healthy, there's no reason why this team cannot compete for a cup. And I think it's strong all the way through. And again, when everybody's healthy, which right now the team isn't, this is one of the strongest rosters, and a roster that has basically redundancy across all areas right now, with one exception, which is center forward. But aside from that, I mean, this team has depth like no other team has.
Well, that's about to be tested, right? Because we saw Alex Collins and Maxime Chanot come off this weekend, both with injuries. Has there been any update on those two guys? Because as much depth as NYCFC have, I mean, this is clearly their first choice center back pairing, and it's a different level of squad without those two.
It is. And so I just asked, as a matter of fact, before coming on, if there was any news from the team. And so far, nothing. No update injuries. Rather, no injury updates so far. The only injury update that I have was that Maxi Morales should be ready for the Columbus Crew on Saturday. He should be back. And now, if he's going to be able to start or he's going to come off the bench, I don't know. But he should be available to play. And hopefully they'll have Tinnerholm back and Alfredo Morales, who's, in a very short period of time, has become an absolute key player for this team. It is a brilliant signing so far. And we're looking forward to really start seeing him play full time.
With Maxi back, do you expect to see this team continue in the sort of 3-1-4-2 type of formation that we've seen the past couple of weeks? Or do you think it might end up going back to the 4-2-3-1, or do you think that Ronnie Deila is kind of willing to let it play out and then settle on something after a few more weeks?
I'd be surprised if they don't switch back to a 4-2-3-1. And more than Maxi being back, it's the absence of Callens and Chanot if they can't go. So you would expect Timmerholm to be back, so you'd have him starting on the right. And then in the middle, I would expect to see Ibeaga and James Sands. And then on the left, it would probably be Goody Thor Aronson, although we're waiting to see when Malde Admundson is finally going to be able to take over that left back spot. I mean, Goody is doing fine, better than last year. He worked extremely hard on his fitness during the off season, but they brought Malde Admundson here to be a starter. And so far, he hasn't been able to unseat Goody. And it's interesting to see that thing develop and how that's going, because when you have Tinnerholm on the right side playing, this is an extremely right-sided team going forward. Extremely right-sided. And so you need a little bit more balance there. And we understand that Tinnerholm, to me, who was the MVP of the team last year and really one of their best offensive players, even though he plays right back, I would expect the team for it to be successful, that it has to be able to worry defenses on the other side as well.
Roberto, well, first of all, I agree with all that. But let's pivot to the man who has probably been the team MVP this year, Tate Castellanos. He just signed a big new contract with NYCFC after more than just reports, obvious interest from Palmeiras. So
yes.
What allowed, or what got him to stay? Because turning down a club like Palmeiras is not something that you necessarily expect from an MLS team. And what ends up being the next step in Tate's career? Because I have to imagine that was part of the discussion between him and City Football Group.
So with Tate, the thing with Palmeiras was that when Palmeiras started to talk to New York City about Tate, the real, which is the currency in Brazil, was at a different level than when it wound up being a couple of weeks later or 3 weeks later. All of a sudden, the currency dropped considerably against the dollar. And so all of a sudden, Tate Castellanos became extremely more expensive than he was at the beginning of the conversations. And for what I understand, and I don't have the exact details of how much money was offered, but the rumors of about $4 million for him seem to be in the ballpark of where they were. Now, it became how much of Tati Castellanos can they get for $4 million? And maybe it was about 70 to 80% when they first started, and it wound up being 50% or maybe even less. And then at that point, for New York City, there's two things going on. One, if you're going to buy Tati Castellanos, you're going to have to overpay for him at that point because he's your only center forward. And they're not going to sacrifice the season because we don't know. Eber is probably coming back sometime in June and probably isn't going to be match fit and the old Eber until sometime in July, if not even August. And so what are you doing in the meantime? So do you have to go out and get, try to get a like-for-like replacement within MLS, or because it's a lot harder to get people from outside of MLS? Look how long they're taking to get Thiago Andrade. He still doesn't have a visa to come in the country. So it's not that easy to go and find players and bring them in. So you probably have to look within MLS and, see who you can grab to fill the void in the meantime. And then at the same time, you have to wonder, how is Eber going to play once he comes back? Is he going to be the same guy? How long is it going to take to him to become the Eber of old, which is a goal scoring machine in his first year here? So there really wasn't much of an incentive for New York City to sell Tati Castellanos on. Now, from Tati's perspective, he wanted a big raise because he felt that he wasn't making, the money that he deserved. And so now they've got to be able to satisfy him. And Palmeiras comes in and offers him a lot of money. And so that makes that a lot more interesting. So he has an interest in going there because of a financial interest. So now New York City had to come up, and I don't know if they actually equaled what Palmeiras was offering him financially, but they substantially came up for, as far as I understand, they more than doubled his salary. So that puts him into the GAM category. And if that didn't exist, he'd be a DP. So he's above the $600,000 threshold. And so, but the team needed him. The team couldn't really afford to let him go unless somebody was going to so overpay for him that you take your lumps for this season and you pray to make the playoffs once you get Eber back, or you pull somebody else back in. And, it was something that you couldn't refuse. But Palmeiras just didn't have what it took to make an offer that New York City couldn't refuse.
I love that we're talking global currencies right now. Soccer is the greatest sport in the world for this reason. Roberto, I want to finish you off on one more and talking about Brazil again. There's been rumors coming out about Thales Magno, an 18-year-old Vasco da Gama, who's been a bit of a mess as a club right now. Sounds like it would be a huge signing if they made it. Is there anything real to this?
The funny thing is that I've been trying to look into it, and so far my sources haven't said anything. Meanwhile, I'm looking at everything in Brazil, and I mean, they have him in New York signing a contract. Seriously, they really do. And and NYC is extremely tight-lipped on all. I mean, they really don't give us anything. It's crazy. We find out stuff sometimes, like we get a 5-minute warning before the press release goes out, and it's like, you can't say anything until the press release goes out. All right, fine. So it's not like we're all the time in the know, at least from the team. So good for them for taking care of themselves first. But it doesn't help me personally, mind you. But I mean, if he comes in, he's mostly a winger who can actually play in the middle of the park, meaning he can play as a 9. And right now, there's nobody else who could really play as a 9. New York City would have to play with a false 9. But he's mostly a left winger, which is an area of need because you have Medina on the right. Yes, you have Tati and Jason who can play there on the left. But as we saw, Jason can also play the 10. Jason was now forced to play right wing back. So, he's been all over the place in a good way because he's a versatile young player. But if they can get him in, if they can get this kid in, he looks like he's a legit young player with a great upside. Now, you're saying Vasco da Gama is in a mess. I mean, they're in second division right now. But the other thing is that Magno hasn't really played a lot. He was injured. He missed 5 games. He's only played like 1 game since March. So we don't know in what kind of physical condition he's in. But the numbers that they're talking about is like $12 million, 5-year contract. And I'm like, wait a second. They're going to spend that sort of money. I mean, this kid better be gold. I mean, there's got to be a guarantee on him if you're spending that sort of money. I mean, that this isn't a flyer if that's if that's the case.
Yeah. 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 Well, for FC Cincinnati, they're willing to do it. So if it's not NYCFC, someone will take it. Roberto Abramowitz, follow him on Twitter. Awesome. Always speaking the gospel of MLS as well as covering NYCFC. Roberto, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Matt. You didn't let me ask you a question about your rankings of New York City FC at 18, by the way.
I know. You're talking about my preseason?
Yes.
Listen.
I am. I need to know what went into that before you kick me off your show.
Okay.
I need to know what went into that.
Perfect. They have one of the best back lines in the league, but looking at it coming into the year, with the age of Maxi and with no depth behind Tati, and at that time, the rumors about Palmeiras were strong, and we didn't know. It didn't feel like this team was deep enough to contend over the course of a season. It doesn't totally shock me that they're having good results, and I think they've brought in reinforcements since I put them down there. But it didn't feel like this was a team that was going to have enough pieces to contend over the course of 6-7 months.
Okay. Here's a suggestion for everybody out there, okay? When you hear rumors out of Brazil, okay, take like a pound of salt and keep it around and just take a grain, just a little grain here and there.
Okay.
And you'll get through it in a hurry, okay? The rumors out there, the media out there, they go with just about anything that they hear, okay? It's not as... Things aren't as well sourced as things would be here in the United States. And that doesn't go for everybody, mind you. But there's a lot of players out there, meaning media out there or quasi-media out there, that will run with the first thing that they hear. I mean, and the stuff that I was getting privately, okay, over the course of the whole Tati Castellanos thing. And trust me, I had really good sources on both sides of this issue. So I knew what was going on. And every day somebody would send me something new about Tati being in Brazil. Tati, no, seriously, saying he wanted out of New York City. I mean, all these crazy things. I go back to my sources and I go, I just heard this. And they're like, no. And so it's like anything that comes out of Brazil, really get your sources, try to get 2 or 3 sources that have been reliable over a period of time, and then just filter out the noise. Although it does make it a hell of a lot of fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, we love all of that. But I'll get my box of kosher salt out. I'll have it around at all times. I promise from here on out. Roberto, thanks so much for coming and joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate it.
So from NYCFC, we now move west a little, Doyle, to the Portland Timbers at number 7. And this is a huge result for them in San Jose. Without Diego Chara, obviously Blanco's not back yet. Mabiala out hurt. The goalkeepers are hurt. And Eric Williamson shows up and proves why he's going to win the Landon Donovan MLS MVP.
It was an MVP caliber performance from Eric Williamson. I kind of thought that he should have won Player of the Week. He was the best player I saw on the field this week in MLS and playing that Diego Chara role. And like Gio Savarese changed things up a little bit. Usually that team plays more of a 4-2-3-1. This time it was a 4-3-3 with Williamson as the back point and like 2 more attacking players in front of him, and he still was able to control the game in the attack. Like he had both assists.
Yeah.
It was a monstrous performance from him, and it was obviously it meant a lot to him personally from his Twitter feed. I think the biggest thing it says long term for this Portland team is that they have a little bit more flexibility in terms of managing the crowded summer schedule than we thought.
Yeah.
Because like looking at it when it came out, I thought Diego Chara, as great as he is, but he's 35 and he's like, even Diego Chara is not going to be able to handle that workload. Well, if Eric Williamson is going to play like this, then you can occasionally rest Diego Chara and try to keep him fresh for the true stretch run and then into the playoffs, which is obviously this Timbers team is going to be there. There are issues though. They have a million injuries in goal, though that didn't matter to Logan Ketterer.
No.
They have, creeping injury issues on the back line. They still haven't gotten Sebastian Blanco back, though apparently he's close. Jeremy Abobasi has come back. He hasn't looked anything close to 100%. It's not looked anything like he did last year. So this team is not fully fit, and they're not close to what I think or what I thought they would be. but they're still one of the best teams in the league, I'm pretty sure. And it's worth remembering, right? Like they kind of endured versus San Jose, and were able to be really opportunistic in getting those 2 goals. Again, the previous week against Seattle, I thought they outplayed the Sounders for 65 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's the only team all year that I've seen actually outplay the Sounders for a sustained stretch. And I think that's who the Timbers actually are. And they're not there yet. They probably won't be there in the next 2 weeks. But I think coming out of the Nations League break, this is a team that has a chance to rocket up the standings.
Yeah, Jeremy Ebobisse coming back is big for their ability to just play through that position. Felipe Mora, whatever, I could say a lot of things about him. No matter what, you don't play through him. At best, he's fox in the box and getting you chances. He didn't finish in the course of CCL, so he wasn't even that. But it's just a different level of style you can play. And then Eric Williamson now, it's just nice to see him take control. And so if he can do that alongside Chara and in place of Chara, this team's only going to be so much better. Is he going to a Gold Cup for the U.S.?
I mean, should.
Okay.
He absolutely should. Whether that happens, I don't know. But like, if you think about the depth chart at that number 6 or number 8 position, rather, it's Musa, McKennie, Leggett, like those 3 ride him in pen. But then, well,
Aronson.
Okay, we're talking about Aronson's a winger. I don't ever want to see Aronson, but like Pomacall gets healthy, he's obviously in there as well, and Williamson. But then again, we're talking about the Gold Cup, right? And it looks like the A team is not going to be at the Gold Cup, so we'll see. We'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. But I'll be disappointed if we don't see Eric Williamson in red, white, and blue at some point this summer.
Well, if you want to hear him talk about it, Extra Time Radio is going to have him on Thursday. We're going to sit down with him to talk about that juicy tweet, because I appreciate things like that. Apparently, he thought about it, was listening to Young Thug, and got inspired and just threw it out there, and the world is a better one for it. So Portland moves up to 7th in the power rankings. Number 8 now, staying in the Western Conference, is Sporting KC, coming off a dominating 3-0 win at home against Vancouver. Polito gets a couple goals. This is a team that's filling in for injuries at center back right now, which is massive for them, but also might always be said. And so, whether Vancouver on the road was the biggest opponent or not, I think coming off that Houston loss, they needed to get 3 points. They needed the emotion of Shallowy scoring
points. They needed to get the 3 points, and they got it. But if they don't get 3 points here, then it's a 5-alarm fire. I mean,
but the way they perform still matters, right? The energy they played with, the way they were able. Nice.
It was like Peter Vermees laid out a bunch of cones. that's what Sporting Kansas City is. It was a good performance. It was easy on the eyes. They got 3 goals. They basically didn't allow Vancouver to cross midfield. They also lost to Houston midweek.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I'm still very lukewarm on this Sporting Kansas City team. Like they're dropping points that they honestly shouldn't. And while this game was very good, like I struggle to see them as a top 10 team right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Ismail Marine at center back is the one that can change things for them, and he's unavailable right now because of injury. I thought he looked fine in the first game and a half that we were able to see him before he got hurt. And as you said, this game they should have gone out and won. They did. I still think the energy they played with, Shallowy getting the goal, which he needs because he's gotten a million chances. And whether you want to put that on KC for creating for him or put it on him for getting in the right spot, he's been there. So it was big to see him finally score one. The other one was Tim Melia returned in this one for the first time this season. I think they were telling the story on the broadcast that he's got a specific song they play when he comes out for warm-ups, which is obviously before the team. Fans were already in the stadium. They heard the song and just started going crazy before he even got out on the field. So it's like that emotional lift you need. And also, he's one of the best goalkeepers in MLS. And this team needs that at their back. So that was big for them as well. Obviously, a bunch of changes around midfield and center back for them in this game, which I think a lot of that was Vancouver specific. So probably won't see Illy playing center back most of the season. And spoilers, Vancouver's going to come way later in this show because they're a lot farther down this list. Let's keep rolling through this. So let's take the short 4.5 hour drive from the LA Galaxy to LAFC or whatever it would take right now in LA. Past all the King Tacos. That's a shout out to our producer, Rich, who's sitting on the line as well in the background. What is going on with Carlos Vela? There's a lot we can talk about with the team. This is probably the biggest story in MLS, but we don't have much to go off of. Give us like an interpretation of what's going on here.
Yeah, the Carlos Vela injury is very interesting because we all know Bob Bradley, and Bob is not the type to give out too much information, so it makes it a little more difficult. But it was just something that they didn't think was as major when it happened in the opener against Austin. And Bob is justified because, once again, we haven't seen him on the field besides Sunday in Seattle. And the thing about Carlos Vela is that they dealt with his injuries last season, and they know that they're not going to rush him back. So he's not fully fit. I'll tell you that much. He's got back to practice last week, which is why he saw some minutes in Seattle. But the way that the game went, I think the plan was never to play him any more than 20, 25 minutes anyway. Bob did say after the game that there's more minutes coming up for him. Whether or not that means he to start back here at the Bank California Stadium against Colorado this weekend is to be seen. My interpretation is that he's still not 90 minutes fit, and the last few times we've seen Carlos Vela get subbed out, he hasn't taken it lightly. If you remember that infamous Carton band spike against the Galaxy, and then obviously the Austin game. So I think him and Bob have to be at a real understanding of what's going to happen on Saturday. Or on this weekend? Are you going to play? How many minutes? And we'll go about it that way. And the Carlos Vela absence is just very odd because LAFC is good enough without him, and they know that. And I think that when we speak to these players, they say that all the time. Like, we're not going to front like this is not a big miss because it's Carlos Vela, but We're still good enough to play without him. And that's just the most baffling part, that this team hasn't been able to score. And I think that's really what has me so frustrated there.
So for all the fans out there, LAFC is not 5th in the power rankings. They are 9th. But Andy is on, and he covers both teams, so we're talking about them. No, we did not go LAFC bias and just still put them 5th, even though they've proceeded to lose over the course of the last 2 weeks. Andy, what's the level of worry then for this group?
I think it has to be serious, and I say that because I think LAFC coming into this season perhaps was at I want to say the least outside factors that really was weighing on them. And I think, let's say the first season, obviously you're an expansion team, you're trying to come into the league and prove yourself. The second year, they still have that Galaxy monkey on their back. It's the narrative that just looms over them until they're finally able to beat them in the playoffs. And then, obviously have a record season history everywhere. I feel like they set a record every single game. But then they get to that Western Conference final and get absolutely smacked by Seattle at home. So then that weighs them down. Then year 3, I mean, we don't have to talk about the craziness that 2020 was. So I think this year coming in, it's like, okay, let's it's a little bit less pressure, but they also place that on themselves. From the outside, I'm saying it's less pressure. From the inside, their expectations is this year we need to win MLS Cup, and I feel like that is kind of what has them confident to get in this year. And then they get these few games in, and they're like, oh snap, like this is not what we expected at all. This is new territory, as Bob said after the game on Sunday. And it's worrisome because they also do know that they have these players set to make some moves, and they know that the team is not looking as it should. So I wouldn't say that there's no worry at all. I mean, it's still the first, it's still the first few games, so we could go about it that way. But there's no way that we can't say that they don't feel that pressure, knowing that Carlos Vela a few months ago for MLS Media Week before the season started said this is probably the deepest LAFC team that he's seen since he's been here. And it seems like now we're kind of looking around like, where is this depth that everybody all the time talks about? And it's a crutch of him not being on the field because he's that good of a player. But when you look at the bench, you're like, okay, what is their best option to come in and change the game? And right now, it doesn't seem like they have a solidified option that changes that attack. So that's worrisome. The players have come out and said that this year is really MLS Cup or bust in a way or not. I believe it was Mark Anthony Kaye that had mentioned that. So they're going to feel this all year. And the longer it lingers, it's going to get worse, obviously. So it's very interesting, the fact that the defense is allowing these goals. And we know the whole Walker Zimmerman conversation from a few seasons ago. It's also the goalkeeper with Kenneth Vermeer leaving the day before the season started. And there's just, it feels like every position on the field right now is getting picked apart. And that's definitely not the way that LAFC functions. And that's not the way that Bob wants to go about it. So there's definitely worry. There's no way that they can't say there's not.
Andy, so one of the things you kind of dropped in there is like they made some moves, and then there's a chance to make more big moves. Specifically, if they figure out what to do with Brian Rodriguez and maybe open up a DP slot.
If Brian
Like,
Rodriguez figures out what to do with Brian
yeah.
Rodriguez.
So what is the latest on him? And like, do you expect LAFC to be able to sort of do an Andre Horta here and either sell Brian Rodriguez or loan him out, open up a DP slot, and make what is frankly like a Seattle Sounders type of move this summer and bring in a big name to boost the team?
Yeah, I think you said it best. I mean, I don't think Brian Rodriguez knows what's happening with Brian Rodriguez right now, which is a bit unfortunate. The way that everything kind of went down is very odd, and I really don't see him coming back to LA. I don't think that's really an option at this point. But Bob was asked the other day, and Bob did kind of just say, "Hey, we would welcome him," which is the answer that you would expect. But I think that if the way that this keeps going, if they do lose another game, I feel like if they lose against Colorado, then there's gonna be red flags everywhere, and that's gonna fast track everything. But you think about they have these next two games, they're home games. I feel you guys when you guys position LAFC in certain places in these rankings because they're still playing quality soccer. They're still dominating games. They're still improving. You're still seeing these great glimpses of passes and whatever the case may be. But they're missing that final third, that whatever it is, a shot, an extra pass. So yeah, if it keeps going this way, I think they're going to be pressured to have to make a move because there's definitely unrest for the first time in a while. I don't think I've seen this type of reaction from LAFC fans, from the people here in LA since that whole they couldn't beat the Galaxy narrative, and it's unfortunate for them because the opening schedule was not easy to LAFC either. I mean, you think about having to play the Sounders twice, then play the Galaxy, which are the two teams that give them the biggest headaches. That's 3 out of 5 games. In the first game, you're playing an expansion team that you probably don't have too much information on, so it kind of makes it a little difficult. But that's not to make excuses. I think they're expected to be better. They know they need to be better. So I wouldn't put it too far past front office, John Thornton, and whoever's calling the shots, Will Ferrell, whoever in that front office is calling shots. But yeah, they're gonna be pressured to make a move because there's no way that the fans in LA and the team is gonna allow this to continue at all.
So everyone make sure to stick to Magic Johnson's Twitter feed because he tweets out everything he's thinking. And he's in that as well. Last one for you. We talked about a lot of the big pieces, a lot of big moves. Corey Baird, so far this year, this was kind of one that I think in MLS we were all excited about. Maybe doesn't make the waves outside where people haven't watched him play. It feels like he's been trying to push that attack while the other pieces start to come back. What have you made of his time so far in LA?
Most definitely. I think Corey Beard has been a bright spot. I think he came in really well. He really meshed with the team. They talked a lot about him and his energy in practice and the way that he goes about it. And he's going to be the biggest beneficiary of Carlos Vela coming back besides LAFC as a whole, because I always say that position in that front attack and that front three is not a striker that you need to be Edinson Cavani that's gonna score every goal. You just need a player that's gonna know how to move and know where to get into those places. And the thing about LAFC is they switch these wings around so much. You'll see Carlos Vela on the left. You'll see Diego Rossi roaming around the middle sometimes. So I think Corey understood that, and I think he does know how they want to function that. And once Carlos comes back fully, I think Corey for sure will be able to kind of make that splash. I think he's been playing well. Like I said, his energy's up there, and you mentioned it in the circles here in MLS. Obviously, it's a move that calls a lot of attention. But in the past, if you think about the players that have played that role, from Bradley Wright Phillips to Adam Diomande to all these different players, like you just need somebody that understands and score a goal every here and there. So I think he's just moving well enough. I think he's doing everything well enough, and Bob says it. You know, he praises the guy a lot. For how he's come in. So I think that he's going to continue to be on the rise for this team and continue to be one of those bright spots as they try to figure it out. But I think Mark Anthony Kaye put it the best after the Seattle game. He said, we just need to score goals, man, because this is a team that's used to scoring goals. And once those goals start flowing in, you're going to see the confidence go back up. Right now, the confidence is at an all-time low, and it's what's really weighing them down. So if Corey Beard could be that spark, if obviously Carlos Vela, when he does get back to 100, could be that spark, then I think we'll be having a whole different conversation in a few weeks about this LAFC team.
He just needs to score more goals than Marco Arena did, which is pretty easy, and then he'll put himself into the record books for LAFC. Andy Diosa, thanks so much for joining us, man, covering both LA teams as well as the rest of MLS. We really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll have you back soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys.
Number 10 is Colorado. They got a big win at home against the Houston Dynamo. This was another game where they should have won, but I still think the way the performance happened matters. And this was the first time we've seen Colorado come out of the gates and dominate a team at home the way they should. They play at altitude. It's tough to go play there. They have a young team that has energy. They should jump on teams to start games. They finally did that. They jump out to an early lead, and then they were fairly comfortable seeing this one out against Houston.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You know, they continued the energy and the good vibes that they sort of finally found in the second half of last week's win over Minnesota United.
Big vibes.
Big vibes. When they get rolling, they are a hell of a lot of fun to watch. Like, I really like this Colorado team. I think I picked them for fifth in the West to start. It would solidly in the playoffs to start the year. They've won 3 in a row now, so they're in a good position to make me look smart by the end of the and they're doing it without Lalas Abubakar, which is huge because the last couple of years, if they didn't have Lalas Abubakar, they were going to give up 4 goals and take a massive loss. So, I mean, you're right. The way they went about doing this, but also they were playing the Houston reserves. I mean, that was Rio Grande Valley out there. It was almost all backups. They played a 5-3-2, which is not a formation that Tab Ramos has used before, or not regularly anyway. And like, if you don't post, it's like beating Vancouver at home. If you don't post a big win in that situation, it says that there's something wrong with your squad right now. And I mean, the good news for Robin Fraser is it didn't say that. It said, hey, the squad's doing well.
And Lalas Abubakar on the bench, so he's close. Sam Vines, who started the year hurt, he seems to be fully back, scores the goal.
He's been awesome the past couple of weeks.
And they haven't got the production off that wing. So he is all of that for them. It's not it's been Shinashiki at times. Jonathan Lewis is a guy who's in and out of the lineup. Like, if he gives them that verticality and that threat on the left, it changes the way they can play. And Cole Bassett, he didn't start the last 2 games. He came off the bench and I felt was the one that turned it around against Minnesota.
For sure.
And in this game, we didn't know if he was a 10, and he does it in different ways, but he looks super comfortable in that spot. And this team looks like, as you said, a solid playoff team with him in there. And that, to me, is already a progression in his career. And I think the ceiling is now as high as an American 10 I've seen in MLS in the last few years.
Wow.
I mean, who's in that list? Brendan Aronson?
Yeah, Brendan Aronson, Efra Alvarez.
Leggett, maybe.
Leggett. Yeah, I mean,
I guess Sasha, when he was doing it a few years back for the Red Bulls.
I mean, I'm not sure I see that from Cole just yet. But he's been, he has a nose for ugly goals, which is what he scored this weekend. He's really good at those late box arriving runs, and he's starting to impose himself defensively a bit. And that's the big thing for him. If he wants to stay on the field, he has to be kind of horrible to play against. And he hasn't often been that in the past couple of years. The past couple of weeks, we started to see some shades of that. Like, he's closing guys down harder. He's leaving some cleat marks on guys, which is honestly, it's what you want to see. You need a little bit of that. And if he keeps doing that and he keeps scoring goals, he's going to stay in the lineup.
And it helps with Kellen Acosta back in midfield because they can rotate spaces. And Kellen is comfortable taking up a lot of the spaces Cole Bassett normally is, gives him that freedom to float and kind of find the game where he has to or drop in. So I think a really good week for the Colorado Rapids. They enter the top 10, I think, for the first time this season in the power rankings. So that is our top 10 for week 5 of the MLS power rankings. David Goss and Matt Doyle with you, talking through all of it, along with some really special guests. Seattle sticking at number 1. It feels like they're going to be there for a while. New England taking a huge jump to number 2. They are first in the Eastern Conference. Philadelphia at 3. The LA Galaxy taking the biggest jump of the week up to 4. Orlando City sitting at 5. NYCFC off the 1-1 tie against Toronto FC. They are in 6th place. The Portland Timbers off their win in San Jose in 7th place. Kansas City moves into the top 10, sitting at 8th place. LAFC dropping down to 9th. And the Colorado Rapids enter the top 10 for the first time this year, sitting at 10th place. So that's our top 10 right there. It's been a lot of fun, Doyle. Good thing we still have 80 other teams to go through.